Hey everyone, I'm Dr. Anna Cabeca, known as the girlfriend doctor, because you can ask or tell me anything. So excited to be with you. Catch me on this week's episode of the Jessie T Show.
Dr. Anna, welcome to the Jessie T Show.
Great to be here with you, Jessie. Thanks for
Yeah,
having me.
it's been amazing connection and just like how we've plugged in and started vibing a little bit, and then all of a sudden, like a couple of weeks after that, maybe not even, but maybe it might have been a week after our first call, I have like this beautiful care package show up to my house with all these goodies in it from you.
I know.
Right?
I'm so happy to send you that.
It was
So,
incredible, and there's so much that you're bringing not just value to me, but so many people around the world. And so many people are, being affected by, in a good way, the things that you're teaching and the things that you're role modeling. And I want to get into, exactly what those things are. But first, can you just give us like a high level overview of who you are?
yeah. So, I am a women's health expert, especially when it comes to sexual health and intimacy and hormone management. I trained as an OBGYN at Emory in Atlanta, Georgia, but I grew up really understanding food as medicine because I'm a first generation American and Middle Eastern background. And so I learned always, growing up hearing about you have to eat, olive oil to make you smart and this to, you know, get rid of the cold. And, the list went on. And I trained in solo practice in Southeast Georgia for 21 years in private practice as an OBGYN. And I just love helping people, but through my own journey, my own mess, my own physical health challenges, physical and mental health challenges. I don't think they can really be separated. So, physical and mental health challenges, I discovered a new way to really help people naturally as much as possible.
I love what we're about to talk about. I'm a big advocate on what you're talking about specifically, like, food is medicine, health is wealth. I mean, I preach that in my financial planning practice where, people love striving for goals and money, but without your health, it means nothing. And you
Right.
can't enjoy that life. If you want to have an abundant life, you have to have abundant health, and you have to have, longevity and anti-fragility and food is medicine and all these great things that I'm into. So I'm excited to go deep into all the cool stuff. So, just for some deeper kind of overview, talk a little bit about like how you've been able to deploy these mindset pieces in your practice, and are you still in practice to this day?
Yeah, so I've retired my clinical practice. So just, so I don't see one-on-one patients, but very high level. I consult with physicians and I teach and I educate and I do group classes in my online world. So I've moved to Dallas, Texas, where I'm raising my youngest child still. The others are grownish, if you know what I'm saying. So the others are grownish and out of the house. And my 13-year-old's home with me, and we have a couple horses and just keeping life busy this way. And I think that, I had to pivot early on in my career around 6 years ago into the online world exclusively pretty much because, part of my health journey, I burn out being a private solo practitioner in a small town, the very lengthy waiting list and high ideals that I could help everyone despite themselves. And I like what you say, Jesse. You said, wealth is abundance, right? Health is abundance, right? To be wealthy, you need your health. And there's a great proverb that says, when you have your health, you have 1,000 wishes, but when you don't have your health, you only have one,
Yes.
right? To have your health. And so I think that is just really key. And part of my journey, learning what I've learned as an OBGYN and working in women's health, is that most of the research that medical care is based on was done on men. And no more than one medication is studied in any individual at one time, yet we go without hesitation to write two, three prescriptions. And, I've known people on as many as 11 prescriptions at one time, and it definitely is devastating to the body. So, that's been part of my journey and my story to kind of come full circle and really empowering us to heal our body naturally as much as possible. We still need our medical care and surgical care, but not to the degree that we may be getting it.
Yeah, it's incredible. I think and you may have seen this, further back than some people, but there seems to be a nice overall a consciousness awakening in so many levels and just the human kind of journey. And so whether that's spirituality, whether that's health and wellness, whether that's business and relationships, there seems to be this tipping point that's happened over the last few years where all these things are starting to converge and come together. And, from my personal journey, I got into really health and wellness and, what they call biohacking and like different augmentations that you can use to, alter the body and really live an abundant life. And one of the main ones, I mean, the three main ones are rest, moving your body, and nutrition. And usually rest and nutrition, and like moving your body is like such a small amount of it, but it needs to happen. And so I started really learning about what causes disease. And it took me back to inflammation, and it took me back to different foods that caused inflammation. And it took me to learning about my own gut biome and like what healthy probiotics were in me, what maybe not so great probiotics were in me, or, things I needed to alter there. And then also the foods that I needed to eat and then stay away from. And so if we can we kind of dive into how important nutrition is and how important, food as medicine can be for someone's life?
Oh my gosh. Yes. This is one of my favorite topics because one of the things that we, have to understand in medicine, we do, and in diet, and especially weight management for women. Like, I'm a menopausal woman, and this is my group, my demographics, hundreds of thousands of clients virtually in menopause have struggled with the weight issues, right? And it's not just the weight issues that come in and of itself, but it's the brain fog, the aches and pains, the arthritic complaints, the rapid aging, it's the, loss of libido, it's the, I mean, just name it, right? All of those things come into play during this time, and most of all, and it's a really transitional time that needs to be especially paid attention to. But we know, based on research, 93% of diets fail. And I always say, well, it's a 4-letter word with the word die in it. How could that ever be good,
Right.
right? So it's but looking at that, it's like, because it's not only about what we eat. So I'm going to dive into what we eat, but let me tell you, it is about 25% of it. Who we eat with, what we ate, when we eat, all of those, the mindset we have when we're eating, our attitude about what we're eating and when we're eating, all of those things play a really big role in our value of our food, but also many more lifestyle components, like you said, resting, sleeping, moving well, so move well, think well, sleep well, you know, love well,
Yeah. Everything
well,
well.
right? All of those, eat well, love well, to be well, right? All of those good things. But I really dug into what I call my keto green approach. So it's, really essential for us, number one, like to break up with the bad boyfriend sugar. And
Right.
I always talk about that brand, I always talk to women typically, Jesse. So I know you've got a lot of men in your audience too, but guys may have had this experience of that toxic ex, right? That
Yeah.
keeps kind of coming back into your life, and just one more time. Oh, just have dinner. Let's just talk for a second, and it's that's sugar, right? That is that toxic relationship with sugar, and sugar comes in our life and it keeps wanting to come in and in and in, and we can live without it, right? And we'll have a better life without it. And you just need to let it go, break up for good with that bad boyfriend sugar. So
How do you do that? How do you because it's an addiction for people.
sure.
It's a craving. It's something that it's a habit as well. Like even the habit of smoking. A lot of times people quit smoking. Yes, it's the tobacco that's addictive, but like the routine of lighting up and smoking. And from what I've heard, I don't smoke, but this is what I've heard from people. So there's a habit that goes into it. There's a sensation that comes from it. There's an addiction to it. What are some of the ways that you can shift someone's physiology and like their mindset away from that addictive behavior?
Yeah. So I would say that first and foremost, the way we shift our mindset away from it is, like, sometimes it's replacing it, right? You can get over an ex relationship when you're in a new relationship.
Yeah.
That's number one. So, like, that's where fat comes in. Fat is
Mm,
satiating, fat is grounding, fat is healthy, fat is necessary for, hormonal production, brain cushioning. I mean, just
yes.
it's necessary for everything. So, and when we have fat, then we're not hungry. And so the way, like, willpower, if you're eating, I always tell clients, if you're having that, fruit smoothie in the morning, like, no amount of willpower mindset is going to help you from feeling hungry in 2 hours.
Right.
So you have to eliminate the carbs from the morning meal, especially, you know, uh, substitute it with healthy fats. Like if we're going to put a fruit in, let it be an avocado. And so that's a really important substitution. So substituting for the sweets that we've had with, or the even the fruits as a sweet. I mean, that's glucose fructose, right? So this with a healthy fat, like, you know, for breaking fast in the morning, your keto green smoothie would look like a great keto protein shake. I have my keto alkaline protein shake and keto green protein shake, but with 0 grams of sugar. That's really crucial if you're adding a protein powder, that it has no added sugar in it, because we're breaking up with that.
Yeah. Yeah.
And add in the extra fat, like with the avocado and coconut oil or coconut milk, and throw in a handful of good greens to add probiotic support to your body, as you know, add good fiber to support your gut microbiome. So that's a really good way, and you won't be hungry. And clients sometimes, Jesse, you know, clients have had cravings their whole life and have been told to eat every 2 hours, and that's just ridiculous.
Yeah.
No, stop.
I started intermittent fasting probably almost 2 years ago, and I love breakfast foods, but I don't have to eat at breakfast, and I usually don't eat until about 2 o'clock every day, and usually between 2 and 8, 2 and 9, depending on my window, is when I'll eat, and sometimes even less. Sometimes I'll do OMAD, like one meal a day, and your body adjusts, and it really there's so much. I don't know how much you're into fasting, and we can talk about it, but there's so much to be said for giving your body a break and giving your system like digestive, like just like slowing it down. And just, for me, your body starts to adapt pretty quickly. And I find myself even more energetic when I don't eat. And I'm not slowing down my body by digesting and like putting something in there. But when you do, you have to be conscious of what you're putting in your body, proteins, fats. And there's been so much data and so many great insights, especially over the last couple of years, that are really starting to course correct. Like for instance, Russell Brand, who's kind of like out there, but he's an amazing thinker, and he's really into a lot of like what's going on in the world. He had a conversation on his podcast the other day talking about how Coca-Cola has 0 nutritional benefits. It's just straight death. And it's like, now you see, I don't know if you saw this on a highlight in the last couple of days, but the world famous soccer player Ronaldo, he had 2 bottles of Coke in front of him at a press conference. And as soon as he saw them, he moved them over out of frame so they couldn't see him while they were interviewing him. And their Coca-Cola stock went down by 4 billion because he did that. Not a big deal because it was 252 billion, but it went down to 248 just because he did that. And he goes, no, agua, like just water. And so replacing sugar is going to keep you alive longer, but hopefully you can dive into the specifics on this, but replacing it with healthy fats and proteins. And what I've noticed is, and what I've seen in different data sets is, for so long, the marketing company arms of these companies have pushed these types of like sugary products, sugary breakfast, sugar. And you start to realize that it's not feasible for the future. You start to realize that it's just basically it's not good for you. And so when you start changing your diet and you start adding different healthy things in, like even more science has come up saying that no, fat is really great for the brain, like you mentioned. And so we're starting to debunk some of the myths that are perpetuated by corporate, basically, is where I'm going with that part of the conversation.
Well, definitely the marketing, right? The weedy cereal for athletes. I'm like, our elite athletes better not be eating that,
Probably not.
And so probably not, right? And so the high carb breakfast sets us up to have cravings and be a high consumer throughout the day, and has led in a large part to the obesity epidemic that we're seeing in our country and around the world, but definitely in our country. And media has had a really big manipulating role in that. And so my second book, Talk About Fasting. Yes, we are designed to fast, and we need to fast regularly. My book that I wrote, Keto Green 16, I talk about 16 hours of intermittent fasting. I want to share a little difference between men and women fasting.
Please do.
Because men, you've got 10 times as much testosterone. You guys can fast longer easier than women for the most part, because you have 10 times as much testosterone. You're not going to get in the catabolic acidifying state of, breaking down muscle, bone, tissue to keep a homeostasis in the body. Women, so 18-hour fast regularly for women is great. Definitely over 13 hours, in my opinion, is mandatory based on research showing decreased risk of breast cancer or recurrent breast cancer in scientific studies. So we want to fast at least 13 hours on a regular basis, and 16 hours on average, and still do extended fast. In my online group, in my Keto Green community, we just did a 3-day bone broth fast, or sometimes we do water fast or just Keto Green shake fasting for 3 days, and just keep extending, keep working or exercising your fasting muscle. So like starting for people, often starting with just shakes and bone broth, and going just to bone broth, and going to water, and extending the amount of days that you've done it. So what's your longest fasting, Jesse?
I've done a 24-hour, but it wasn't something that I was striving for. It was just busy day, didn't feel hungry, just so 24 hours. But I haven't been called to do like a 36, 48, but maybe one day. I just, for me, it's a lifestyle. For me, it's every single day, it's at least 16 hours, 16, 8, if not further into that 24, that OMAD. And, when I say 24, 20 hours off, 4 hours on. And so I know that there's deeper, like, spiritual components to fasting, depending on what you believe in, and but there's so much of a mindset strengthener. There's a health component to it. There's a spirituality component to it. So speaking of times of fasting, how about yourself? Have you gone past 24 hours? Like, how far have you gone with your fasting?
Yeah, I've done some, like, just pushing as a biohacker, right? In menopause, and just seeing what I could do. So I've gone as long as a 5-day water fast and a
Wow.
3-day dry fast. Now, those are not things, I mean, I've been fasting now for years. You work up to this,
Yes.
but it is, and there's always a spiritual component for me. Like, there's a decision I have to make. There's clarity I need. The first time I did that 3-day dry fast, I'd been reading my Bible, and opened up to the chapter where Saul, now Paul,
Yep.
is on the road to Damascus and is blinded. And so he had nothing. And I'd read this story so many times, but only this time did I really hear it. And nothing by mouth, nothing to eat, nothing to drink for 3 days. Then his eyes were opened and he heard the voice of Jesus. And I was like, okay, I guess this is what I have to do now. And it really was game changing in my life. It was a huge career pivot, and a point where I was near broke and bankruptcy, and trying to be a single mom to all my girls, and doing everything, and deciding what my next right step was. And let me tell you, it just gave me so much clarity. I could be at this state now in my life. So
What was it that got you through the 3 days? Was it faith? Was it what was the 3 days like in terms of the actual, physicality of it? And then, like, what were your insights and takeaways? Because it sounds like it was such a profound experience for you.
yeah, it was. And whether it's water fasting, or just bone broth, or anything else, so however we're starting to fast, the concept, and sometimes I still struggle, like, okay, I really just don't want to do a full day fast. Just don't want to right now. But like, when I set my mind to it, it's like I've made a promise to myself. I can keep this promise to myself. And number one, I recognize that I'm physically strong. I'm not going to die if I don't eat. Not going to waste away. I'm not going to, but there's no harm that's going to come to me. So I've worked this fasting muscle, right? There's no harm that's going to come to me. Monitoring blood sugar, monitoring ketones, monitoring all that stuff. But, at that point, like, for that dry fast, I was really careful. I did use a glucose monitor, and, was just really, I paid attention. I did take showers, and I did brush my teeth. Some people won't even do that in a dry fast,
Wow.
but I did. And I think the mindset was like, when thirst came or when hunger came, it's just like, it's not going to hurt me. It's like, okay, just focus on a distraction, reading something. It's just let's just make it till tomorrow morning and see how you feel tomorrow morning. And I kind of set that milestone with my 5-day water fast, was just, okay, I'm just going to take it one day at a time, and I'll see how I feel when I wake up the next day. And that was like, okay, let me just make it through today, and tomorrow I'll decide if I'm going to continue. And so I did it that way, and kind of set the mark to do, well, I feel good. Let me keep going. And I tell clients all the time, between 24 and 48 hours, your hormone ghrelin, which is your hunger hormone, really spikes. And it's just this reaction to be like, okay, hey, usually I'm fed by now. You're not feeding me. Like here, like, I'm banging on the door, feed me. But there's no physiologic reason to be fed. So if you know that when you make it cross that hump, you're like, hey, okay, I can do another day. Wow. If you realize it's a hormonal, physiologic craving, then it is really a physical craving.
Did you notice any sleep disruption at all? Like any in your sleep patterns where you kind of like either going to bed late or waking up earlier, like broken sleep, light sleep during that time?
Yeah, I definitely did. And too, when I'm in a high fasting mode or detoxing, if I'm really pushing detox, typically disrupted sleep, sometimes during. And so knowing that, really creating that sleep ritual to really help, and supplementing with extra magnesium or melatonin or progesterone in the evening to help make it, get more restful sleep during that time as well.
Unbelievable. Yeah, that's if I get called to it, I'll let you know and see if, I do it longer than what I normally do. But it's become such a lifestyle for me to do the fasting every day. It's weird when I don't do it. And I'll tell you, when I don't fast and I break my fast like early in the morning to have breakfast, it completely slows me down. It puts me in like a brain fog, and it's out of rhythm for me. So I've really noticed a huge energy difference, a huge clarity difference, the ability to run fast, run strong, so to speak, physically and mentally. It's a huge difference when you fast. And so you touched on hormones a couple of times, and this is something that I've been I'm a 39-year-old man. So I started to have questions on like, do I need to start like supplementing and like as I go further? And at this point, I don't think so, but I know that hormones like testosterone are decreasing for me year over year. And so what are some, and I know you work a lot with women. I know you understand the concept of this holistically, so you could probably speak to the male side of it, but what are some things that men could be doing in their late 30s into their 40s to keep that natural production of testosterone rolling healthily, whether it's through sleep, food, working out, like large muscle groups? Like, what are some things that you advocate for? Maybe some tips and tricks for those that are dudes around my age that are listening to this.
Yeah, no, it's really important. And I've worked also both with men and women in hormonal management too, and lectured at Canyon Ranch and different things for men and women and YPOs. But this is really good that you're looking at this now, in your 30s and thinking, okay, what do I need to do to really optimize my hormone production as I age? And that's what everyone should be doing. I encourage women too, because at mid 30s, those hormonal fluctuations causing PMS or irregular menstrual cycles, all that stuff starts during our mid 30s, and we ignore it because we're powering through. And the same is true for most guys too, just kind of powering through. But you're ideally already doing it by fasting, intermittent fasting, getting into that state of ketosis, and guys will get into ketosis quicker. So fasting, and then when you break that fast, break it with a keto green meal, so you don't get the brain fog. So say, for example, some sauteed greens, a piece of, 4 ounces or 6 ounces or even 8 ounces of meat, and think of fermented, maybe some sliced ginger or some kimchi or sauerkraut, some kind of fermented vegetable too, just to really feed the gut and keep the biodiversity in our gut really nice and happy, right? A good community there. So seriously, even if you just did eggs and bacon for your break fast and didn't have any vegetables, you guys would do well. We really need the alkalinizers as women even more, just to clear out the acidity.
Yep.
Again, your testosterone's protective. But so many guys are struggling with decreased testosterone because of hormone disruptors. So even the chemicals in your shaving cream,
yep,
or your shampoo and your soaps and your laundry detergent. So getting all of those cleaned up, and the, air filters in the house, and being very conscientious of chemicals you're cleaning with are crucial. But those endocrine disruptors, I know a guy he's 54, he runs 4 or 5 miles a day. and he drinks out of plastic water bottles. I'm like, dude, like you're so awesome, but this is really going to affect you. There's
Yep.
no one who drinks out of plastic water bottles that we don't see phthalates in their blood work.
Wow.
So when we see your blood work, and we can test for these endocrine disruptors in your blood work, so such as the phthalates, the BCPs, and bisphosphonates, and the parabens, all of those create hormone disruption. So first and foremost, let's clear that up. Secondly, focus on a good night's sleep and those high intensity interval training exercises so that you can build your own testosterone and growth hormone. So that you can build your own testosterone naturally as much as possible and support your adrenal glands. And so we support our adrenal glands with meditation, with rest, with oxytocin filled activities such as intimacy, laughter, joy, play. We can definitely hit on more of that later, but
Yes.
we want to support our adrenal glands. And supplements, the supplement I sent you, Mighty Maca Plus, it will boost your DHEA production by 70 to 200% in 2 months, taken
Wow.
2 to 3 scoops a day, because it has these adaptogens that support your adrenal glands, whether you're in overdrive or burnout. And that can really make a difference.
It's incredible. Yeah, there's conversations, between some of my peer groups of guys that are around the same age, and I have some guys that are starting to like, supplement with TRT, like administered by a health professional, and they're seeing some effects. And I have some of my friends that just are dialed in. They're doing all the right things, like we just talked about, like from all the products that you use to sleep to nutrition to working out, like all these different things. And I think that it's such a laundry list for some people when they look at it, but it's just slow changes over time. Like for me,
Yeah.
it was looking around my house and the products that I use, are they natural? Like the last thing I don't use now that's not natural or healthy is like a hair product. I just haven't gotten to it yet. I know what I want to get, I just haven't done it yet. So, but like from shaving products to soaps, I use, and you could tell me if this is a good or bad one, but the Everyone soap. Have you seen those before?
Mm-mm.
It's a plant soap. It's called Everyone soap, and they have different kinds of lavender and different kinds and stuff like this. But it seems like it's kind of like when you look at a food. Is it a whole food? Does it have ingredients? Is it one ingredient like steak or chicken, and or does it have names of like ingredients that you can recognize? So it's kind of one of those
Yes.
things where I'm down to even my laundry detergent, my lotion, my my shampoos, my toothpaste, all the things that I use on day in day out basis. I use, what about I think it's called Myers, like Myers dish
Oh,
soap.
yes. Meyer soap. That's great.
Is that good? Okay, yeah. So I use that. I use also. I'm just down to my hair product. So for people that are trying to, I guess, adapt into a healthier lifestyle and to really manage their nutrition and or hormones, what would you recommend to them in terms of getting started? Like, how would they get started in terms of like optimizing their health?
Yeah, and this is a really good point. And especially like when it comes to this testosterone replacement therapy, and I've lectured on this around the world. I've been a keynote speaker for BioT even. And this is one of my cautions. Don't start it too young. Address the underlying issue that's causing the low testosterone.
Yep.
Because it was funny actually. I was interviewed in a radio show and there were two wrestlers on, and one was, on testosterone replacement, and was young, like maybe 41, 42.
Wow.
And I said, well, the downside is that, definitely you're going to have testicular shrinkage. He goes, oh, it doesn't bother me at all. I'm like, I guarantee you it's going to start to bother you. I mean, but like, just think about it. It's like you have, what's that telling you is that you're negatively feeding back. So you're no longer making your own testosterone.
Yep.
So do you feel good about that? I mean, I don't feel good about that. And that's why I'm really careful with hormonal management, that it's supplementation, not oppressing your body's natural production, because there's other downstream consequences. No, even if it's bioidentical, anything we take is not going to be exactly the same as what our
If
body
it's not endogenous.
produces downstream,
Yep.
right? The metabolites, the production of the gland has to continue to function. So when we see that, it's like with birth control pills with women, we're shriveling up the ovaries, we're suppressing the natural ovarian hormonal production, which is detrimental long term. And we're seeing this over and over again coming out more and more. So the same thing with testosterone. The other thing, and I'll give you a story because I had this great patient who was coming to see me. She was flying in from New Orleans, and I was treating her with bioidentical hormones and kind of my keto green approach and addressing many issues for her. She was in her early 50s. And so she brought her husband in. She's like, well, he's not really keeping up with me. And he's really struggling with burnout at work. He was the
Wow.
vice president of a very big, uh, Fortune 500. And he's was just saying, I feel like I've lost my edge. And so I checked everything out. And certainly his adrenals were tanked and his testosterone was tanked. And I said, okay, well, these are things we have to do naturally. But in the meantime, I'm going to put you on this, at 50s, like, okay, they don't want any more children. Both of them are on cue together, maintaining their relationship, their marriage, et cetera. So I'm like, okay, I'm gonna put you on some testosterone. And I do injections, especially with partnered, individuals, because creams and gels rub off onto your partner.
Yeah.
So injections work great. Pellets is another option, but injections we can increase and decrease a lot more, easily. We can be in tune with our body. So I put him on injection. And I caution him. I said, if you're getting irritable, agitated, if
Mhm.
you're feeling things that, you don't normally feel, I mean, just give me a call. Let me know what's going on. And we'll follow up in 3 months. And so he called me 6 weeks later. He goes, Dr. Anna, I have to tell you that, initially I started feeling great. Everything was good. And now I'm kind of having thoughts about and that I don't need to be having nor want to be having. And I don't think it's not me. I think it's the testosterone. And so I said, okay, stop what you're doing. Let me do your labs and see what's going on. And accidentally, he'd been injecting more than what he was supposed to be injecting on the syringe. I mean, it was, an innocent mistake on his part, but he felt it, right? That way too much testosterone. And his levels were like 1300, and 600 to 900 for men is a sweet spot. I want
Yeah.
to tell guys out there, don't let anyone tell you different. 600 to 900, unless you totally want to suppress your own testicular function, and then pulse it. Like with the injections, you can pulse it and then sometimes we add HCG or Clomid to guys so that we can keep their testicular production and all the other benefits that come with it to,
Wow.
adequate. So we really want to consider that with men. And I've seen in the male clinics, actually was consulting with one of the largest hormone clinics. And I asked several of the MD physicians, I said, well, what's your divorce rate in your clinics? I mean, these are high testosterone rates. And they're like, it's really high. I'm like, you can't treat the guy without treating the girl, you have
Wow.
to treat the couple together. And it's the goal is, anyway. So that's my pet peeve with
That
early testosterone replacement and too high testosterone. And not enough people are talking about it.
I love that holistic approach and doing it in a relationship narrative versus just a singular, because it's going to affect the relationship. And so how do you bring in the wife or the spouse or the girlfriend in that situation where you are doing a holistic relationship approach while working with the guy predominantly? I'm sure you do things with the woman as well, but like how did you bring those two together?
Yeah. So, I mean, definitely always will consult the female patient. Look, I like to talk about this when we're addressing your hormones, that it's going to affect your life and your relationship. And it's important for your significant other to be on board with what we're doing. And because it's lifestyle changes, it's dietary changes, it's, hormones and, and it's a team, especially when it's sexual intimacy, and we're treating low sexual desire. We really want to address both issues because oftentimes, especially as we age, women are struggling with vaginal dryness and men are struggling with erectile issues. So we need to address both. It's like with guys, Viagra is great, but if she's struggling with vaginal dryness and it hurts to have sex, I'm sorry, you're going to create a discordance in the relationship.
Yep.
And the same is true. Like, okay, now she's great and excited, but he can't get hard,
Mm.
then he's going to feel less adequate and they're going to struggle. But it's a silent struggle for couples. So often it's not something that anyone feels really comfortable talking about. It is the most, as confident as we are as human beings in whatever role or whatever success we have, there is in our lives we are more vulnerable than in our sexual intimacy and sexual function. So you have to be really careful and then be able to bring up words and allow them to have words. So for women, I always encourage it. And for men, I think it's absolutely essential. If the partnered relationship, he's getting all tuned up and she's not, then there's going to be a divide. And we want, long lasting great, happy, healthy marriages, one of the number one things that create longevity. And so it's important to bring this up and bring it up as couples. And sadly, we don't do it well enough in our medical.
It's because, well, I think just even in general, we're like, if you think about it from even just in the United States alone, like we're very much, we're not as touchy feely in a positive way as like other countries, right? Like, so like I grew up in an Italian family and everything's like hug, kiss, like it's very, like it's,
Yell, shout.
yeah, very much so, very
I
much
love
so.
it.
Everything's extra, right? And it's like, and a lot of times you see like a dismay or like, no, don't do that. Like there's just like an upbringing, I think that's one piece of it. But even getting into the emotional side of it, like I was thinking about this when you were talking about in a relationship. And so, have you ever heard the term demisexual before? Do you know what that
Mhm.
is? So like sapiosexual is you have to have an intellectual attraction to someone. If you like, let's say you're dating or whatever, to kind of courtship, to kind of like, physically be attracted to someone as well. And then there's also this term that I heard recently called demisexual, which is you have to have like a deep emotional connection with someone to really enjoy
Mm.
the physical aspect of it as well. What are some of the things that you see play into this relational dynamic, even in a sexual context of emotions? Have you ever seen like patients where maybe they weren't emotionally available, or they had some emotional, trauma or baggage that weren't allowing them to show up in the bedroom? And how are some of the things that you could kind of like shift that for those people?
Oh my goodness, this is such a good area. And in my first book called The Hormone Fix, I talk about it takes more than hormones to fix our hormones. One of the chapters I write is chapter 8, and it's on stress cortisol connection. One of the big things that create emotional, um, distancing or unavailability is this stress cortisol oxytocin paradigm. And so what's happening is when we're like, this is really so important to understand. I'll tell you from an example. I had a guy come to my practice, and he was 34 years old, and he'd been in a train accident. I was working with the train system and CSX
Yep.
trains, and
Yep.
it derailed, and it was very traumatic. And he goes, I've been dealing with this for, a while. The biggest thing is that I know I love my wife and I love my daughter, but I don't feel love for them. Like I come home from work and I just feel like disconnected, like I'm a stranger in the house. And, he was familiar with some of my work on this. And so that's why he came to see me. I always say it takes a strong guy to go to a gynecologist for advice.
Oh yeah.
But this is, my blinders were off at this point because I lived through PTSD and that emotional isolation and disconnect. And so it was a really big eye-opening experience for him to hear that there's a physiological reason to this, and we have to increase oxytocin. We have to do the oxytocin increasing behaviors and release that post-traumatic stress. When we've had a trauma like that,
Mhm.
it is like a dragon, under the surface that is always ready to erupt or come back, or you don't know when that fear is going to happen again, that, that accident, what else, something else could happen tragically, because we know that to be true because it already has, right? And so there's that PTSD component that we have to disconnect the nervous system from that. So emotional freedom technique, EMDR, that's eye movement desensitization and reprocessing, that you can do with a counselor, is pretty a bit widely available now, and it's
Yep.
proven to be effective. And the American Psychological Association also. So for PTSD, we've got to break that cycle that's constantly going. And I like to give the example to people to understand, like whether it was a car accident, whether it was the death of a loved one, whether it was, some trauma in your life, a traumatic experience, that it's like when those nervous pathways are set when we've had trauma and we've relived that trauma mentally. We always say in medicine, when someone has seizures, and I have a daughter with seizures, so I've studied a lot about neurology as well. But when a person has their first seizure, like, okay, well, we don't see anything organically, but on MRI or whatever, that she may not have another seizure. So that's true. But when she has the second seizure, there's going to be a third. That's how quick those pathways are set.
Yep.
The same is true with PTSD. So with that also, there's a physiologic response, like your body, like when you're stressed, that cortisol, when you think about it, that cortisol pours out and your paraventricular nucleus in the brain says, okay, look, cortisol, this, this steroid hormone, this fight or flight hormone, this really great anti-inflammatory, let's kick it into overdrive hormone. It's like frying out your nervous system, and the paraventricular nucleus in the brain says, okay, you're frying me out. I've got to shut you down because I can't exist like this. It's a catabolic state, right? You're breaking me down. Very acidifying hormone, the most acidifying hormone in our body. So the paraventricular nucleus puts brakes on cortisol production. What's happening too, when that, when it's putting brakes on the cortisol, it's also putting brakes on the oxytocin. So now this situation where typically cortisol goes up, oxytocin goes down, oxytocin goes up, cortisol goes down. But when cortisol is being suppressed, cortisol and oxytocin are both low.
Okay.
And that's that feeling that shows up like, I know I love my wife. I just don't feel love, or maybe I'm not in love anymore with my wife, or I used to love my job. I just don't even want to go in anymore. Like that burnout feeling, that stressed physiology, that is the physiology of divorce. This is the physiology of burnout. This is the physiology of turning back on things and people you love. This physiology. So you have to interrupt this physiology and re-empower oxytocin through oxytocin increasing behavior. So not only, like I always tell clients, if it's like you're feeling more and more isolated, more and more alone, you go out to go grocery shopping or to a restaurant, you see people and you don't want to say hello. You're like, oh, I pretend they don't see me. I don't see them. There's sometimes there's a physiologic reason for that. It's this stress, this too much stress. And resentment is lack of self-care. So we can feel resentment towards in this burnout state, resentment is very, very common. So we go back to biblically, the gifts of the spirit. What is good? What brings us joy? What are the good, noteworthy, valuable things in our life that we can really honor, respect, and enjoy, and focus on the things that are good, focus on the positive, and bring more of that into our life. And that is game changing. When you shift your physiology to address the positive, to keep, attitude of gratitude as a daily practice, as part of your nature, as you envelop that into part of your nature, that just shifts your hormone production. And to do that, you've got to reduce the things that are causing the high cortisol. So, maybe it's the news, maybe it's the newspaper, maybe, it's, certain people in your life that can be very toxic emotionally to you. But doing the behaviors to really of things you enjoy, of increasing that oxytocin, and that can help. In his case, he did that. And I temporarily prescribed him some oxytocin as well, and he, it just changed his life. He was so excited. He sent me a picture of his daughter on his shoulder, and he had this huge smile on his face. And it was good. I mean, it made such a big difference. There's another story of a guy. One of my patients had come to me. She was married to a guy in the military, and she was breastfeeding their son when he came back from assignment. And she said he was there 2 weeks, and he just told me he didn't feel love for me anymore, and he left. And I said, well, what
Wow.
happened to him? And I had the opportunity to talk to him. And I said, well, what happened in Afghanistan? And of course, it was all trauma, war related, post traumatic stress. Veterans have a high rate of divorce. It's this physiologic disconnect that they experience. And so when I was able to explain that, at least he could understand why he felt that way. And it's not that he's broken, right? It's not that they were broken. And for her to know that, if nothing that she did or could have done differently would have changed, sadly. If we don't know that, we feel that disconnect. And so understanding the physiology of chronic stress and post-traumatic stress, and correcting it as quickly as possible.
What does it look like for you to discern these issues with clients or patients, in terms of do you run a battery of tests, from hormonal to blood work to everything that comes from blood work, but also are you doing emotional diagnostics? What are some of the things you're doing to really calibrate a plan for someone that comes to you?
Yeah, and I put some of my inventories, my questionnaires, in my first book, The Hormone Fix. So in that book, I have one of my medical symptom questionnaire as well as a hormone toxicity questionnaire that I created. And there are certain questions too related to oxytocin that we can ask. It's like certainly just touching in, like on a scale of 1 to 10, how do you feel when you're with people you love? On a scale of 1 to 10, when you're at a social event, do you feel immediately drained? And those are there are a couple other things. Are your hands cool and clammy? Do you have a pale complexion? And do you not blush? What those are signs of low oxytocin as well. So there are physiologic reasons, like for example, with autism, it's the oxytocin as well. So really working on this in autistic patients has been great. So one of the things that I do, I had another client, a 23-year-old football player who had a traumatic brain injury, and his mom brought him to me because I was treating her for sexual dysfunction with oxytocin, and she was feeling great and connected. So she did what she wasn't supposed to do, but she gave her son an oxytocin, and she goes, he just responded. So I want you to evaluate him. So I brought him in and evaluated him. I gave him the questionnaire and certainly like scored very low on the questionnaire. Didn't look at my eyes. He was very pale, clammy handshake. And I was like, yeah, there's no doubt he's oxytocin deficit for sure. Blood tests are really hard to do. So it's a clinical evaluation for me. You can confirm with some blood tests, but they are really hard to do and very, difficult. So the questionnaire, and then I gave him an injection of 10 units of oxytocin to see his response. And immediately he looks me in the eye. He gets this big smile. His ears pink up. He's get this little flush on his chest, like almost like an orgasmic flush, right?
Yeah.
That or orgasm increases oxytocin. And so he's looking at my eye contact and, just like game changing. So that showed me that he was oxytocin insufficient. So, this burly football player had to get a dog, had to start watching funny movies, reading comic books. Yeah. So those were things to help him shift out of that and there are other things with traumatic brain injury, but certainly this one cortisol oxytocin shift, and then work really on deep meditation to manage our cortisol, but then always looking at the positive and being grateful. I mean, these mindset, there's nothing that, certainly like short term with supplementation can be beneficial, but we don't want to suppress our own body's oxytocin. But short term, that can be beneficial. And I've used oxytocin too in patients, like on their way home from work, had a great physician internal medicine colleague, and her marriage was struggling, raising her teenage kids, she was struggling. And I said, okay, we've got to change your behavior on your way home, listen to great music, stop taking calls from work, and you know shut no more emails, and just really listen to great music that lifts you up. And then for a while we'll do this oxytocin, 20 units sublingual on your way home. And it just that way, when she walked in the door, she was able to be mom and wife and girlfriend and kind of step out of her high stressed physiology. And so once you retrain your body that way, the prescription doesn't really become necessary.
So, how does alcohol play into all of this
Oh,
in terms of the havoc that it could wreak on all the different systems, hormonal, everything? Just like what are some of the things that you see, and what do you recommend to your clients, your patients, when it comes to alcohol in terms of
oh,
their
just tequila.
yeah.
So I do have a bias on this, and this is
Yeah.
probably one of my areas of of challenge too, personally. But certainly, we know a long laundry list of negative effects of alcohol. But then you think, okay, well, here's this red wine, the red wine study, resveratrol,
Yeah.
right? So I can have this glass of red wine, and I'm going to get resveratrol, and that's supposed to be cardio healthy. And I put resveratrol in the Mighty Maca Plus supplement. It's one of the 30 superfoods.
Oh yeah.
But I looked at this, and I've traveled around the world, and I said, really, it's not the red wine that is creating the longevity. It's the table of friends and
Yes.
families you're drinking it with, right? You're having fun. If you're an Italian family, like our Middle Eastern family, you're yelling at each other. You're having a great time, right? You're roasting each other. I mean, you're just, celebrating all the small events that are meaningful in your lives. And And you're doing those things. Those are oxytocin building activities. So is it the oxytocin or the resveratrol? Hands down, it's the oxytocin. So
No
drinking a
question.
glass of red wine every night by yourself, you know, it's not medicinal unless it's decreasing your cortisol. If you're doing it that way, and it's just that's your relaxation, and that's it. It's a 4 ounce, 6 ounce glass of wine. Really want to be careful on how big those glasses are, but and then there are the times. So I think it's definitely I love my tequila because it's thermogenic and like zero glycemic effect pretty much. So a good tequila is a nice thing. But I tell you, by the time you get through a half bottle of anything, it's not good for you.
No,
So
no. So yeah, talk about the flip side when you start to get into that half bottle of anything. What are some of the effects that it's having on the body?
yeah, definitely depression. It can cause a coronary vascular effect. So you can definitely see more high blood pressure and coronary vascular disease, as well as insulin resistance, diabetes. So you're really creating a metabolic syndrome, a metabolic effect. But most people don't really realize how it does cause depression. And even one glass of alcohol will interfere with a good night's sleep. And you say,
Yeah.
well, it really helps me get to sleep. You're not getting into a good deep REM sleep. Check your sleep cycles, check your monitor yourself. You have a biohacker on
Yeah. Yeah.
device. Yes, a
Yeah.
device like an Aura Ring or the watch that you can just watch and see, really what's working for you and what's working against you. And then you take your pros and cons, if it's once or twice a week, but if it's every day, probably doing more harm than good. And of course, we all know those people that had their glass of scotch every night and lived to 100.
Right.
But yeah. So,
So there's kind of a narrative that's been poking out a little bit. You've talked about play and community and friends and all this stuff earlier and getting back to that. But then you also just talked about like specifically when you're in that social environment with a drink or two, that's usually what the benefit is the community. It's the playful, it's the laughter. It's like you said, snapping back at each other in Italian or Middle Eastern family, like just giving each other shit. So have you heard of blue zones before?
yes,
Yeah.
yes. And I've studied the blue zones to see. And one of the biggest longevity factors is that community
No question. Playing
and
community.
faith.
Yep. Dancing, creative things like arts and things like this. And I've been doing some studying on this in the recent couple of years. And it's really interesting to see that, it's all about the people you surround yourself with. Obviously healthy habits matter and environment matters, access to good water and good food and all these things matter. But at the end of the day, it's like who you do life with is really a big part of it too. And there's this cliche thing that I picked up somewhere along the lines, you're the average of your 5 closest people in your life, the 5 people around you. But also, if you show me the 5 people in your life today that you spend the most time with, I can show you your future. And so
I love that.
if there are people that are getting after it, they're motivated, they're family oriented, they're spiritual, they're health and wellness oriented, like most likely you'll probably be on that same path. And then the flip side of that is if they're into drugs and alcohol too much, or if they're out partying too much and they're not taking care of their bodies and they're up to their eyeballs in debt, like that's probably where you're going to end up too. So it's really matters who you decide to do life with.
So I couldn't agree with you more. And at the end of the day, it's who surrounds you that matters most. Like, what does that look like? And I look at that, end of life. What's my goal? Hopefully celebrating 50 years of wedding with, the love of my life and having my children, grandchildren, great grandchildren around us, looking on a community that we help and support and that's been there for us. And that's ultimately what we want at the end of our days. And that makes the most difference. And let me tell you, oxytocin is the most important anti-aging hormone that there is. Then we have to look at the positives. We have to focus on what brings us more oxytocin in our life and the things that we can do to do it. That's why having pets, having a happy marriage, having healthy relationships, I mean, those are longevity factors. And the more we can do, that is the most overpowering to any disease that we can face.
One last thing I want to ask before we jump off here is what's a good reset for people, whether it's, mental, physical, emotional, someone, for instance, even for myself, like I'm into these things, I'm into health and wellness, but I still, I probably drink too much sometimes on a weekend, or I eat too much junk food, or like whatever the case may be. But I do have a baseline where I come back to, I'm like, okay, that's enough. Like I didn't get good sleep last night. I don't want to do that again. What's a good way to like flush the system in, or just kind of like recalibrate, start from zero to kind of clean out and start over from a good, homeostasis?
Yeah. So in my book, the hormone, and I've had I'll tell you the first thought that came to my mind after I tell you this one. So in my book, The Hormone Fix, there's a 10-day keto green detox, and that is good to do anytime. It's a great reset. You're really working that intermittent fasting, and even, just to really cleanse. I think when you're like coming off, I would say there's detox and retox, right? So there's that life balance, right? So
Right.
after you've retoxed, you've got to detox, and it's crucially important. Don't forget that piece. And so you can maybe just even have a green smoothie day, just really focusing, or going vegetarian for a week but staying away from grains. So we have a keto vegan plan too. And so, I mean, just really cleansing your system in that way is important. But let me tell you, when it comes to a reset, and I've got to do one coming up here in another week or so, but just 3 days of camping, because you're allowing your circadian reset. There's no better biohack than that, honestly. And of course, you got to love it. But waking up with the sunrise, going to bed with the sunset, being out in nature, sleeping on the ground or in a hammock, or, and you're out with, like, we have horses. So my daughter rides. So we're often in our horse trailer camper, but you're outside most of the day, and there's no TV on, and you're just plugged and in nature and doing things with either by yourself or with someone you really can spend 3 days in nature with, so that you care about. And just that reset is unbelievable. We get a lot more than vitamin D from the sun, and
Yes.
especially more sunrises and sunsets, and being in nature is, better than anything I can write on a prescription pad, honestly.
Have you heard the names Ben Greenfield or Paul Chek?
Yes, absolutely.
Love those guys. And they're really big into, because really Paul Chek has taught a lot of these people that come after, like Ben Greenfield and some of these other biohackers that are out there. But they're really big about talking about keeping one foot in the ancestral and one foot like with modern and science. And it's like what you're talking about, circadian rhythm, like getting up with the sun, going to bed with the sun, eating in that time frame, like not eating past, when the sun goes down, or, just kind of staying in accordance with some of these laws of nature. They're there for a reason, right? And they're natural. Getting vitamin D. Why don't we have any governments in the last 13 months saying get more sun, eat better, sleep better, and train? Like, they're not giving us the tools that we need to be healthy. They're saying, take this pill, take this vaccine, do X, Y, Z. Whatever your stance is, whatever side of the fence you are with, like the whole vaccine and everything, like at the end of the day, we have so many natural tools. Get outside, take your shoes off, ground a little bit while you're getting some sun, while you're working out and getting fresh air. You're going to have the best day of your life. I mean, these are some
Absolutely.
natural tools that we have access to, and people they want that pill because big pharma and media have been pushing the pill for so many years.
Yep, exactly. And I think that just really understanding, how we're designed, and from traveling around the world, looking at traditional societies, and especially ones that are, say, just have sustained for a long time, Indian societies, Middle Eastern societies, like what is a big part of the culture. And, in these societies, you spend a week celebrating someone's wedding. One
Yes.
wedding for a woman is one of the highest, a woman and the mother of the brides, one of the highest oxytocin secreting moments, in your life. It's a really high oxytocin moment. But that bringing in community, laughter, joy, celebration of every step, is that you're building this. Imagine, I look at, like, you're building oxytocin around this couple to help them have the longevity relationship, and like the village that helps, sustain a healthy community, healthy marriage. And I think those are oxytocin behavior. These countries that hug and kiss on the cheek, is
Yes.
that by accident, or does it decrease cortisol and increase oxytocin? These behaviors that have been designed, part of societies that are friendly, happy, joyful blue zones, that are, more affectionate.
I love it. I love it. I'm gonna have you on 1,000 more times because there's so much
Mwah.
I want to talk
Love you.
about, so much I can likewise, and so much I can plug into you about. And even from a student standpoint, just learning, and the types of questions I have, I'm sure other people have too. And so, before we jump, what's it on your 2021 to-do list that you're looking forward to, whether it's business or personal?
Oh, on my 2021, really, I want Oprah to love and use and talk about my product
Yeah.
Julva, which every woman wants. That is like my sticky note on my mirror. It's like, get Oprah some Julva. So I'm gonna, hopefully, that's happening.
Beautiful, beautiful. Well, if do you have an inside track to Oprah? Or do you need a connection or two? Because I'm about two connections away.
Well, I could use an extra connection. I absolutely could.
Gotcha. I got someone I'll plug you into and see if it can happen from there. That'd be beautiful. But
Thank
I want
you.
to be the first one from the audience and the listeners to say thank you so much for who you are. Thank you for showing up in the world the way that you do, powerfully, intelligently, gracefully, and all the things that you're bringing to people is so powerful. And people need to hear more of what you're doing. So we'll make sure that we get all your links into the episode and people can find you. And we're looking forward to the next conversation. But thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. I love what you're doing, Jesse. Thanks.
Thanks so much, Dr. Anna. Take care.